prayer time at the end.
I'm like that, new church. I just want to scan something. Evil.
So Judges chapter 5, the whole chapter is a song that Deborah and Barak sang or said. Oops, looks like our microphone fell down. So we're going to read through the song, and what's interesting, as you'll see, is we had the story in chapter 4 of how Sisera, he was the captain of Jabin's army, how Sisera was defeated, but the song has other details that we don't know from chapter 4. So thanks to Deborah and Barak, we have more details because the song has some interesting details. So we're going to look at that. So would you follow along? Judges chapter 5. I'm going to read 31 verses.
Oh, wow.
All right, stay awake here, guys. Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day, saying, here's the song. Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel, when the people willingly offered themselves. Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. I, even I, will sing unto the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, and the heavens dropped, and the clouds also dropped water. The mountains melted from before the Lord, even that Sinai from before the Lord God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied, and the travelers walked through byways. The inhabitants of the villages ceased. They ceased in Israel until that I, Deborah, arose. That I also arose a mother in Israel. They chose new gods. Then was war in the gates. Was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? My heart is toward the governors of Israel that offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless ye the Lord. Speak ye that ride on white asses, ye that sit in judgment and walk by the way. They that are delivered from the noise of the archers in the places of drawing water, there shall they rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts toward the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. Then shall the people of the Lord go down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, and lead thy captivity captive, thou son of Abinoam. That he made him that remaineth have dominion over the nobles among the people. The Lord made me have dominion over the mighty. Out of Ephraim was there a root of them against Amalek. After thee, Benjamin, among thy people. Out of Machir came down governors, and out of Zebulun, they that handle the pen of the writer. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah, even Issachar, and also Barak. He was sent on foot into the valley. For the divisions of Reuben, there were great thoughts of heart. Why abodest thou among the sheepfolds to hear the bleating of the flocks? For the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Gilead abode beyond Jordan. And why did Dan remain in ships? Asher continued on the seashore and abode in the breaches. Zebulun and Naphtali were a people that jeoparded their lives unto death in the high places of the field. The kings came and fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan in Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no gain of money. They fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. The river of Kishon swept them away. That ancient river, the river of Kishon. O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength. Then were the horse hoofs broken by means of the prancings of their mighty ones. Verse 23, curse ye Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Blessed above women shall Jael, the wife of Heber, the Kenite, be. Blessed shall she be above women in the tent. He asked water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth butter in a lordly dish. She put her hand to the nail, and her right hand to the workman's hammer. And with the hammer she smote Sisera. She smote off his head, when she had pierced and stricken through his temples. Boy, can you imagine singing a song about this? Kind of interesting, isn't it? To make a song out of it. At her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay down, and at her feet he bowed. He fell where he bowed. There he fell down dead. The mother of Sisera looked out a window. Boy, this is interesting. And cried through the lattice, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariots? Her wise ladies answered to her, yea, she returned answer to herself, have they not sped? Have they not divided the prey, to every man a damsel or two, to Sisera a prey of divers colors, of needlework, on both sides, meat for the necks of them that take the spoil? So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goes forth in his might. And the land had rest for 40 years. All right, what a song. But it's a song that rehearses the battle in chapter 4. So let's go through it, because there's some details here that are interesting about the war. Let's just go through little by little. Verse 2, she says, praise ye the Lord for avenging Israel when the people willingly offered themselves. Think about that. When did God step in to solve the problem? When Israel repented. So when they willingly, he didn't force them.
Yes, that's right.
But the persecution kind of encouraged them, right? Encouraged them to turn back to the Lord.
Right.
But they had to willingly offer themselves. Well, let's keep going. God is patient. Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes, and I will sing unto the Lord. You know, this is a song to the Lord. Now, did the Lord need to be reminded of all these things that happened in the war? In that battle?
He's rejoicing in the Lord, though. This is a song.
Okay.
Like David rejoiced, he made that woman mad.
Yeah.
He was dancing, but he was rejoicing in the Lord.
The people can repeat this and listen to this and
It's
tell their
historical,
children.
and it's also, I think she's trying to, I think she's, if it's a song to the Lord, I think she's really
Yeah. She's singing to the
praising
Lord,
the Lord.
but they're reminding themselves of what God had done.
Right.
All right. So when we're in church and we're singing, who are we singing to? Each other or to the Lord?
Praise the Lord.
To the Lord. But we need to be reminded, right, of God's great work. All right. So verse 4, here's where she really jumps into some of the past things that God has done. And we're going to look at Mount Sinai and a couple others. But it says, when the Lord went out of Seir, he marched out of the field of Edom. Those were things in the past. The earth trembled. Heavens dropped. The clouds dropped water. Mountains melted before the Lord, even that Sinai. She's talking there about when God came down at the mountain and gave them the law. Mount Sinai, that at least at that point. So she's rehearsing some of the other big things that God has done. or had done. Then in verse 6 it says, in the days of Shamgar. Now who's that? Well, Shamgar, hold your place there in chapter 5. Go to chapter 3, verse 31. When we were reading chapter 3, and we were talking about God's deliverance there's only one verse that tells us about Shamgar. That's verse 31. So after him, this is after who was the judge in chapter 3? Y'all remember who he was?
Ehud?
Okay, Ehud. Remember, he was the left-handed guy, and he went in and killed the king. All right. Chapter 3, verse 31. There's only one verse that talks about the next judge, who was Shamgar. Look what it says. After him was Shamgar, the son of Anath. He slew 600 men with one ox goad and delivered Israel. That's all we know about him, is that this guy single-handedly killed 600 of the enemies, and he judged and delivered Israel.
With an ox goad?
Ox goad.
What are we talking about?
Well, do you all know what a goad is?
No, I don't.
Prod, to get them moving. Stick. All right, but in her song, go back to chapter 5, verse 6. In her song, she tells what the background was during the time of Shamgar. Because that one verse in that previous chapter doesn't give us much information, just says Shamgar delivered by killing 600. But look at verse 6. 5, 6. In the days of Shamgar, and in the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied, the travelers walked through byways, the inhabitants of the villages ceased. They ceased in Israel until Deborah came. What she's saying in her song is things were so bad people didn't want to go out. They stayed home. They didn't go on the highways. They found other ways to get around, the byways it's called. In other words, there was probably highway robberies. Things were pretty bad during the time of Shamgar. So God used Shamgar as a part of his deliverance. All right, so that was a picture of what it was like when Israel abandoned their God. You know, some people say, well, what difference does it make if Israel went after the gods of Baal? I mean, so what if they want to worship another god? But this tells us that every time Israel went after another god, things got pretty bad.
Yes,
in the land. Things got out of control. It didn't just affect a few things, it affected their whole lifestyle. What happens when a nation turns its back on God? Things get bad, right?
What's happening to
Any
America?
ideas of a nation that maybe has turned its back on God, and we see what's going on? Yeah.
We're living it.
Yeah. Because think about it, when they turn their back on God, as Israel did,
no principles.
it affects everything.
It affects everything.
Their attitudes,
Yes.
right? No principles.
No rules. What
Yeah.
rules? It's almost anarchy, really.
The other thing too was that when when all that happened, they chose new gods
Yeah.
and they worshipped. They worshipped Satan.
Yeah.
What do you think the
Is what they
attraction
did.
was?
So,
Do you think that the elites or the wealthy part of the tribe were the ones that went first? Do you think that the business people were the ones that missed? Because that doesn't seem like it starts out at the bottom. This sounds like we're doing business and interactions and things, and
Well-
that's kind of where, the United States is. We have all these wealthy people that want to make everything global now.
well, what did Jesus say? A little leaven leavens the whole lump. That's the way sin works. Sin permeates everything. Yeah. So really, regardless of where it starts, it just
Yeah, it just
fills
permeates.
everything. If you put yeast in the bottom of the dough or in the top, it's still going to just permeate. All right, so verses 6, 7, 8 kind of give us a picture of things were pretty bad when they turned their backs on God. It didn't get better. It got worse. All right, so let's keep going. Now here's Deborah's heart. Verse 9, my heart is toward the governors of Israel that offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless ye the Lord. Did you You remember that word willingly somewhere else in the chapter?
Verse 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beginning.
The people willingly offered themselves. That's how they turned back to the Lord. And then in verse 9, she's talking about the leaders willingly turn back to the Lord. But it says in verse 9 that her heart was toward the governors. She didn't just come marching in as a judge and favor one group of people over another. Her heart is for the governors. She wants the leaders to turn back to the Lord. And she says here that they willingly offered themselves.
And she mentions in the rest of the chapter those tribes that did not come and help. So they did not offer themselves willingly. So it's kind of a contrast.
Right. And we're going to see how many tribes didn't offer help and how many did later on. Verse 10, she says, "Speak, ye that ride on white asses, ye that sit in judgment and walk by the way." Kind of interesting, an interesting thought. She says these people, these leaders willingly turned back to the Lord as the people did. And now she's saying in the song, you got to speak up about it. You got to speak up. Leaders, don't be silent. Lead. Speak up. Leaders should lead. They should be the first. As it said in the Old Testament, that they would put on sackcloth and ashes. Daniel did, other people did. They did that for their people. That's very common that leaders would be the first. David did, that people would just fall before the Lord and say, Lord, Isaiah did too. I'm a man of unclean lips and I live among people of unclean lips. They didn't just blame everybody else. The leaders said, we got to lead, turning back to the Lord. All right, so let's keep going here. We get down to verse 14. We're going to jump down there. Out of Ephraim. Now these are the 6 tribes that helped. I think I counted 6 here. Ephraim, it says, there was a root of them against Amalek. See, here's what happened. When Deborah rallied the troops to go fight against Sisera, where'd she get her troops from? Well, they put the word out to the tribes. They probably sent messengers to all the tribes and said, guys, come help. We need help. Tribes, put together a militia, come join, and let's go fight this Sisera guy. That's what the judges would do. They would rally the people to fight. So we're not told how they rallied them, but we're told 6 of them responded. Look at verse 14. Out of Ephraim, there was a root of them against Amalek. So you have Ephraim. After thee, Benjamin, among thy people, out of Machir. Now, there's no tribe of Machir, okay? But this is a song. And so, if you're a student of the word and you go, wait a minute, what's Machir? What tribe is that? Well, you have to go back to Genesis and see that Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And I'll see if I can explain this quickly. Remember Jacob had sons?
Yes.
And we call them the 12 sons of Jacob or the 12 tribes. But the problem is one of Jacob's sons is Joseph. And there's no tribe of Joseph. Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And Jacob basically adopted those 2 and said, they will be tribes. They will be of my inheritance. So you have Manasseh, and Manasseh was split in half. Half of Manasseh was on one side of the Jordan and half on the other. Okay, because the land they occupied was on both sides of the Jordan. Machir is the son of Manasseh. So here's what people think. I'm just going to give you a thought here. People think this, that maybe Machir was the leader on one side of the river because Manasseh was split in half. And the other side. And so by calling out Machir here, which is the tribe of Manasseh. He's referring to, or she's referring to more of that local one. So let's keep going. I won't make a big deal about it, but Machir is the tribe of Manasseh. Came down governors out of Zebulun. There's another one. They that handle the pen of the writer. Now there's one more that's not mentioned there, but he's mentioned down in verse 18. Because she says, Zebulun and Naphtali were a people that jeoparded their lives unto death in the high places of the field. Meaning that Naphtali and Zebulun were ones that responded. She doesn't tell you that up in the top. So there's 6 tribes that responded and said, we're going to help. Now what she does is, in verse 16, she mentions the tribes that didn't help. And she goes, why abodest thou, look at verse 16, among the sheepfolds to hear the bleating of the flocks? This is Reuben. For the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Apparently Reuben, the people from Reuben said, we're staying home. We're going to take care of the animals. And they searched their heart, basically saying, I don't think it'd be a good idea to go to war right now.
They did a lot of talking.
Yeah, right.
They did all these, what happens this? What happens? They
right.
sat around and
Instead of just responding,
yeah, they just brainstormed themselves.
they just wanted to do a lot of staying home. All right, verse 17, Gilead abode beyond the Jordan. They didn't want to come. They wanted to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Why did Dan remain in ships? Of course, Dan was the one over by the Mediterranean, and they had fishing expeditions. We're going fishing. We don't have time to go to war. Even though Deborah was calling up the armies and says, come, help. No, we don't have time. We're too busy. And then Asher continued on the seashore and abode in his breeches.
In its creeks, mine says.
What?
Mine says in its creeks.
Creeks. In other words, we got a lot to do here on the shore. We're developing the land. We're planting vineyards. So you have tribes that didn't want to come. It's interesting how in her song she tells the excuses they give, right? Which, are they valid excuses? When Deborah's calling up armies to fight against this enemy, and they go, well, we're a little busy here at home. We don't have time.
Not in the eyes of the Lord. They were always told that He will help your brother. They always said that's what God told them.
And you remember that under Joshua, they did work together.
Yes, they did.
To take down the strongholds. And then after they had taken down all the strongholds, they were allowed to go home. Why is it different now?
Right.
Well, maybe they've become comfortable back home. But verse 18 does say that Zebulun and Naphtali, so Naphtali is up in that other group, they jeoparded their lives unto death in the high places of the field. So they counted the cost, took the risk, and responded to God's call. Come help fight.
Right.
Interesting, isn't it? You have 12 tribes. Half of them say, yeah, we'll do it. Half say, too busy.
Have they gone through a new generation already?
That's a good question. Probably so. Yeah, probably so. Because Caleb's already passed on. His son, or son-in-law now, has been a judge for 40 years. So I think we're into a next generation.
Yeah.
There's still people there who came into the land, but you do have a lot of newer ones. So that brings up another point, right?
Yeah.
Transferring your faith to the next generation. Isn't that where the breakdown is? So maybe the reluctance to help out is they weren't there when the first crusade, we might say, or the big expedition into the land happened. They weren't there. That's history for them.
Well, Ehud reigned, well, not reigned, but Ehud judged 80 years, and then it doesn't say how long Shamgar did, but it says that they were under Jabin, king of Canaan, for 20 years.
So we got a lot of time.
Well, this might have been something that Chuck said. They were fishermen, and they were probably had a good business going.
Yeah.
So, they didn't want to interfere.
Right.
They didn't want to bite off the hand that fed them.
Right. But remember,
that's worshiping another god.
Deborah wasn't asking these people to forsake their lands.
That's right.
She was just asking them, come help us fight.
Bring us some guys to help us.
We
fight.
need help.
Yeah, we just say vacate your land.
Yeah. And we're going to see that there was a town that didn't help, and they were cursed. We'll see that later.
First
But-
morals.
Okay, so verse 19. Let's keep going here.
You'd be like I
The
would.
kings came and fought, then fought the kings of Canaan. They took no gain of money. Verse 20. Now, in the battle, if when we were reading chapter 4, I think I mentioned last week, the King James uses the word discomfited, which we don't even use today. It says Sisera's army was discomfited, meaning confused. That's all it means. Out of sorts. Well, look at verse 20. This gives a little bit of more information of maybe what happened. How come they got confused? How can an army with all these chariots of iron get confused? Well, it says in verse 20, they fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Now, I don't want to make more of it than it is, but it seems like the sky was spinning or something. It says the stars and heaven itself was fighting against Sisera. I don't know. Do horses get kind of disoriented if the sky is moving around? I don't know. Come on, you're a cattle expert. What if the stars start moving?
Not your honor. My hands to their mouth. They got to do whatever I
No,
want.
okay. But if they're driving the chariots,
Platform. He puts money on a spinning platform, they're gonna get dizzy. So I'm sure that everybody was getting dizzy.
yeah.
You know,
And she says here, though, that the river of Kishon swept them away. Obviously, it rained pretty hard. The river overflowed its banks, but it says it's an ancient river, meaning it wasn't usually that way. So it caught them by surprise. The stars are doing something weird. We don't know. Use your imagination. God was bringing judgment on Sisera and his army in a really unusual way. He didn't throw, hailstones down from heaven. He just made it so confusing that they all got bogged down and Sisera jumps off his chariot and goes running away.
Well, animals know, right, when something's happening,
I guess,
like
yeah.
earthquakes or something like that.
Yeah.
I know in California, whenever that happened, the dogs and cats, they all knew. They would run and try and hide.
Well, there's probably a lot of thunder and lightning also.
It could have
Yeah.
been thunder and lightning.
Yeah, that'll confuse.
But it is saying from up top, there's all this weird stuff happening.
Yeah.
A river that doesn't usually overflow its banks.
That
You got
was-
water. You got stars are doing weird things. Maybe the clouds are moving real fast. Maybe they're swirling. I don't know. Verse 22 says, then the horse hooves were broken.
made them dance so hard or something.
So what these horses were doing, they were destroying themselves.
Right,
Kicking each other and breaking their hooves.
breaking
And
their hooves.
by means of the prancings. So the horses are out of control, basically. Now, can God do that? Can God bring about confusion like that? Absolutely. Isn't it interesting the many different ways God used to defeat these armies? Like I said, hailstones.
Well, they were chariots of iron. I'm sure lightning's hitting some of them.
There's an idea.
And that would really throw a horse.
What would happen if lightning hit an iron chariot? And then you got, like electric fences, and if they're touching each other, you got a chain reaction, you got horses going crazy.
With water around.
Yeah. So God did it. It was obviously a God thing. Okay, now let's talk about the curse of Meroz. Unless we had this song, we wouldn't have known that there was a town nearby called Meroz that was asked for help. And they wouldn't help. Curse ye Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Now let me ask you, does God need help? Can he do it on his own? Sure he can. But listen, God always works through his people. So he doesn't have to have you help, but he chooses to work through people because he's in the business of developing people. And when we help, or when we are a part of it, we grow. Are y'all following me there? So that little phrase there, they came not to the help of the Lord. Don't get the idea that God's powerless and he needs a lot of people to help him. It's really for our benefit. But they didn't come when they were asked for help.
Are they of Israelites?
What's interesting is we don't know, there's no mention, or there's no other place in the Bible where we have the town of Meroz. Nowhere else. So the only thing we know about it is Deborah knew there was a town nearby that got asked for help, and they said no. So the angel of the Lord said, okay, and cursed them.
Maybe they're gone, they were gone shortly after.
Yeah, we don't know.
After.
Pastor,
Yes.
is the angel of the Lord, is that Jesus?
You know, that's a good question, because it says there, the angel of the Lord, and Lord is, at least in the King James, it's capital L-O-R-D, which is Yahweh. An angel means messenger of Yahweh. It could have been Jesus in the Old Testament. Could have been. We're just not sure. We just know it was a messenger. Whether it was Yahweh himself coming or sending somebody, the curse came through the angel of the Lord. Now, let me give you a little, you all know that in the 1700s, America fought the Revolutionary War. We revolted against what power? Who were we subject to before we became independent?
Britain.
Britain.
Yeah.
All right, Great Britain. Here's a problem. We were British from the 1600s up until the middle 1700s. For over 100 years, we were a British colony.
Right.
Mayflower came in 1620. Not until the 1750s or so, there was rebellion. You had the Boston Tea Party. Just think of your history.
Yeah.
Now think of it this way. We were a British colony. Now we're revolting against the British. But there were a lot of people living in this land, not out here in Arizona, but back east. They didn't want to break with Britain because
Boston.
it was their family, or they had relatives on the other side of the Atlantic, or they had businesses.
Yeah, the upper class.
Okay, so do you know what they called people who didn't want to revolt but lived in this country?
Tories.
Okay, but the big term was loyalists. They were loyal to the throne. They were loyal to the king. Well, now that posed a problem, because if you were a revolutionary, you wanted independence, you would look at your neighbor who wasn't really interested in independence because he liked it the way it was, and you would call that person a loyalist. Do you know what they also called them? I found this out by reading history. Let me read this. In the time of the American Revolution in the 1750s, the Loyalists were referred to as being guilty of the sin of Meroz.
Wow.
That's what the writers would say. They would say that the Loyalists were guilty of this sin of Meroz. In what way? Well, the revolutionaries, people who wanted to be independent, would say, help us fight against these British.
Right.
I'm not getting involved. Just like Meroz did. Meroz was called to help, and they go, I don't want to get involved. Maybe they had ties with the Canaanites. We don't know. You have to just imagine what was their reason for not helping. But I thought that was interesting, that in our own history, we called the loyalists guilty of the sin of Meroz. All right, let's move on. Any comments about that? Do you see how easy it is to just sit back and say, I don't want to get involved? Because why should I jeopardize myself? Yeah.
So I was gonna say, so as all this was happening, they obviously turned away from God and towards other worshiping, other idols or whatever. So they weren't taught. I don't think there was people, the elders, whoever, to keep reading the word, the Torah or whatever they had. And they forgot about it.
Well, the past.
That's what's happened up here.
Yeah. And you remember that when they first entered the land, remember they put up those stones, they put up these big monuments, and they read the law from beginning to end. Because they said, this is going to be the law of the land. And how quickly they would just walk away from it. So good point, yeah. They didn't follow the law. Okay, let's keep going. So, the guilty of the sin of Meroz. Interesting. I wonder if we could be guilty of that. If we're called to do something for the Lord. Oh, I don't want to make waves.
Yeah.
I don't want to be associated, I don't want to be persecuted. So, verses 24 through 27 is just an interesting picture of Jael, the wife of Heber. It says, blessed above women shall be Jael. Of all the women, she's honored. I couldn't help but think that when the angel came to Mary, remember Mary? And he said, blessed art thou among women, not above. Mary was blessed, but she didn't have a special position above women. But Jael, in the song, they're blessing her above women. That woman had courage.
She wasn't even an Israelite.
That's right.
It's a Kenite.
Blessed be, or blessed shall she be above women in the tent. He asked for water, she gave him milk. I think it was Ernie said last week, milk puts him to sleep, right? Or put you to sleep as a young kid.
Yeah.
All right. She put her hand to the nail.
Warm milk.
Oh, warm milk. Look at the description here. You can just see her hand going out, getting the nail, other hand grabbing the hammer.
Yeah.
She put her hand to the nail, her right hand to the workman's hammer. With the hammer she smote Sisera, smote his head, when she had pierced and stricken through his temples. Now, some people read this, and I'm not going to go either way, but some people read this with the understanding that she took the hammer and hit him on the head. Then when he was unconscious, she drove the nail. Read verse 26, because it can seem to go that way, right? She put her hand to the nail, her right hand to the workman's hammer, and with the hammer she smote Sisera. She smote off his head when she had pierced and stricken through his temple. So I'm just throwing it out, that it may be a little more description of actually what happened, but we don't know. We don't know. We do know this. She put the nail through the temples. Very brave woman. At her feet he bowed, he fell. He lay down. At her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell down dead. Why is there so much description about what she did in a song?
Maybe it was a big deal, maybe for a woman to act this way. It's like, whoa, look what she did. I mean, my goodness, usually women are making bread and playing with the kids, and this is going out and face this guy, and look what she did.
I mean,
Courage shows courage.
Deborah is describing incredible courage
Yeah, very, very.
for this woman.
But
And,
so she did it when he was standing up.
no,
No, he was laying down.
he was laying
He
down.
was asleep.
Yeah, he was asleep.
Yeah. At least in chapter 4, it seems like he drank, fell asleep, and right through.
Oh.
This is like slow motion.
Yeah.
It just goes through the details. in slow motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, she gave him milk
So,
and butter.
You know, I can't imagine singing this song in church, you know. Oh, she took the nail. Oh, she grabbed the hammer, you know. Let's put some music to this. Well, but you know what? You know what it's doing? It's taking a person, Sisera, who had the extreme advantage over Israel, with all his chariots of iron, and it's putting him in his place. A woman takes him out. A woman who just, all she had was a nail and a hammer. She didn't have a sword. She didn't have explosives, no gun. She didn't even have a chariot. But she took him out.
David and Goliath.
Yeah.
It's interesting too that, I mean, he came running to her tent. She didn't
Right.
freak out. She actually was very welcoming.
Yeah.
Did she know who this guy was?
Apparently, yeah, they were friends.
Oh.
Or at least they were friendly to that.
The king.
But she chose, remember the problem with Meroz, they didn't come to help.
Right.
She chose to identify herself with Israel. Yeah. And not the stronger part, which was Sisera. Okay, so you know what I can't help but think? It really doesn't matter what you have in your hand. If God is on your side, He'll do incredible things. You remember Moses? God came to Moses and said, I want you to go back to Pharaoh. And he goes, I can't talk. You know, remember he stuttered?
Yes.
And God says, what's in your hand? He says, a rod. Throw it on the ground. So God even used a man's stick. Right? So it really doesn't matter what it is. It's, are you willing to use it for God?
Well, and are you willing to trust in God?
Yeah.
Because that part also takes courage. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, all of a sudden you're going to believe in God. What I'm trying to say is that along with the courage is you got to have belief.
Right. So this woman here did, with a hammer and a nail, what all the soldiers of Israel could not do.
That's right.
None of them could take down Sisera,
Right.
but she did, because God worked that way. Okay, let's keep going.
Don't make me get my hammer.
Way to go,
That's
Luann.
been passed down now to our age as a rolling pin.
Yeah. Or a skillet, you know, or iron
I find it
skillet.
interesting that in chapter 4, it says that the Lord routed the army for Barak. Didn't give Barak the credit. And then in this song, Barak's hardly even mentioned. It's all given to a woman. And she only killed one person.
Right.
You know, the rest of the army killed.
How many? Yeah.
But you were saying she was an Israelite. Either was, I can't even remember her name right now.
Rahab?
Rahab. Yeah, but when they went to go spy the land,
Right.
she's in the Hall of Faith.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. Okay, let's keep going here. Verses 30 and 31, or verse 30, kind of gives us an idea. We don't know this, what Sisera used to do with his victories, but this is pretty graphic and just kind of gives us an idea. Have not they sped? Now this is what the mother, remember the mother's looking through the window and wondering, where's Sisera, my boy? Well, how come he hasn't come home yet? Why is his chariot so long in coming? And verse 30, have they not sped? Have they not divided the prey? What did they used to do when they had a victory? They would loot. They would take everything and divide it up, take it home. So you'd come home from war, you had some really sweet looking swords and knives, maybe some horses, because you took everything. And every man a damsel or two. The word damsel there is, I won't go into that, but it's a woman for your own pleasure is basically what it was, a prostitute. These guys were merciless. That's the kind of guy Sisera was. And who took him down? A woman with a hammer and a nail. But see, this is what the victors used to do. And then they used to take colors or cloth needlework, divers colors, clothing. I mean, they'd strip the clothing, the armor, stuff off soldiers. These guys were merciless.
What do they mean by divers?
Many different.
I mean, not the ones that go underwater.
No.
it's
Divers
diverse.
means diverse, many different kinds of colors. All right. So there's two destinies here. Verse 31. Let all thine enemies perish, O Lord. So the enemies of the Lord, a prime example of what just happened, are going to be judged. If you stand in opposition to God, this is what you face. God will be victorious. So that's what verse 31 says. So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord. But, here's the other destiny. But let them that love him be as the sun when he goes forth in his might. And the land had rest for 40 years. So I'll ask you the question, which one of these two would you like to be? Would you like to be an enemy of the Lord, as it says here, that perishes? Or would you like to be on the side of loving him and shining like the sun? Wide open, prosperity. God takes care of you. He loves you. He blesses. Well, that's what the song ends in. So think about it. The song is simply a recollection of the battle. And the last verse, verse 31, is basically the conclusion. What's Deborah's point in singing this song? Why did she even make this up? Because she wants people to remember, look guys, you're either on God's side or not. And here's a clear example of a guy who was against God, and look what happened to him. And God took him out. And he took him out in a very unusual way. He didn't take him out with the force of battle and strength of soldiers. He took him out with a woman and her hammer and nail. God works in mysterious ways. So, what do we learn from this song? Well, we learned that Deborah was quite a poetess, right? Poetess, is that what it is?
Poultry.
She was able to put, no, not poultry, a poet and a poetess. She was able to put into words some pretty beautiful things. Look how great God is.
Yeah.
And when we went to battle, these 6 tribes helped us and these didn't.
They weren't cursed though, those tribes.
No,
Only
they
that
weren't.
town, only that
They
town.
weren't cursed.
Okay.
Only that one town was made an example of, I guess. Yeah,
To the other tribes?
yeah.
I don't
Can you
know.
imagine those tribes that didn't help? And then they heard about this Meroz that was judged by an angel of the Lord. And they're probably going, oops.
Yeah, that's what
Man.
I think it was an example.
Thank you, Lord, that wasn't us. You know, the Bible says the fool sees another and takes notice. Proverbs says.
Yeah.
The fool sees the fall of another and goes, ooh, maybe I don't want to do that. Learns from the mistakes of others. Maybe we should learn from others' mistakes, right? So, what's that?
And our own.
And our own. So, does anything else jump out to you in this song? Anything you want to comment on before we close?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
How it says the land rests for 40 years.
Yeah.
God's always dealing with numbers for 40.
Yeah.
And, you know, just, I don't know why the land rested for 40 years.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. Most of the time it was because the judge ended up dying. The judge becomes a judge in the prime of his or her life. And it's given unto man, you know, for, what is it, 20, 80 years is the average. I mean, because it says, when that judge died, the children of Israel went right back. That's the way it always was, every time the judge died. So maybe God was choosing these judges when they were mature. not little kids, high schoolers, teenagers, mature, and then lived out their lives judging, and it was great. But then the judge would die, and
So Deborah was the judge those 40 years?
I think she was. We're told she judged.
This song is about two women. It also mentions Sisera's mother.
Yeah.
How often, that was all conjecture, right? Nobody knew what Sisera's mother was really saying.
We don't know that she was looking out her window and all, but
Yeah, but this song is written by a woman about Jael, and then Sisera's mother.
yeah.
It strikes me as funny.
Can I
That she
read
was-
these, from the commentary,
Yeah.
real quick? It talks about how Jael had a special blessing, they were in a tent, but then God gave them the powers, and that they will not lose the reward. The mother of Sisera looked for his return, not in the least fearing his success. Let us take heed of indulging eager desires towards any temporal good, particularly toward that which cherishes vain glory, for that was what she here doted on. What a picture does she present of an ungodly and sensual heart. How shameful and childish these wishes are of an aged mother and her attendant for her son. And then it says, and thus does God often bring ruin on his enemies when they're most puffed up.
Oh.
Deborah concludes with a prayer to God for the destruction of their foes and for the comfort of all their friends. Such shall be the honor and joy of all who love God in sincerity. They shall shine forever as the sun in the firmament.
Good.
It's all about loving him and not ever turning away.
One of the commentators I read mentioned the fact that, and this again is a little bit of conjecture, we don't know for sure, but Sisera apparently was a very proud person, because from reading verse 28, where his mother looked out the window and cried, "Why is his chariot?" This one commentator said, can you picture Sisera saying to his mom, "Mom, I'm going to be back. This thing will take no time, man. We are going to outnumber these guys and crush them. And just watch for me. I'll be back." I don't know. Is that why she looked out the window and goes, "Why is he taking so long?"
Well, and it's,
he said he'd be right back.
not only is he proud,
Yeah.
but he's convinced the people of that town
Yeah.
that he is, bigger than, the best.
Right.
And he's got 900 chariots. So how in the world could he lose?
Yeah. Right.
I think Deborah was speculating.
She could have.
That's what her mother wanted.
Yeah. Could be. But we do know that he had the advantage. Way overpowered Israel.
Power advantage.
Except that he didn't know the chariots were going to get stuck in the mud.
Right.
Things would be swirling around and there'd be chaos. So he didn't count on that
Can't
part.
plan for that.
Stars against him.
All right, well, let's do this. Let's pray, folks, and let's thank the Lord for that we're on the winning side, right? And this is just an example of how God takes seemingly unimportant things like a nail and a hammer and finishes the job
They were proud, yeah.
through very unsuspecting people. Let's pray.
I have a prayer request.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Samantha just got out of the hospital again, and she had
Yeah, you better.